Welcome back, and thank you for tuning in to HK Cheating Stories. We appreciate each and every one of you joining us. Where in the world are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Now, let's get the story started. My name is James Thomas. For 10 years, I believed I had the perfect marriage. I worked hard, provided for my wife, and trusted her with everything. But one night, one unexpected change of plans. I came home early and discovered the ugly truth. Lisa, the woman I loved, wasn't just cheating. She was running a business behind my back, trading our vows for cash, power, and pleasure. Most men would break, but I didn't. I recorded everything, set a trap, and prepared to take back my life, one calculated move at a time. This is the story of how I destroyed my cheating wife. The restaurant buzzed with quiet conversations, silverware clinking against plates, the faint hum of jazz playing in the background. I scanned the room, searching for my client, but my eyes froze the moment I saw her. Lisa, sitting just a few tables away, looking radiant as ever, her soft laughter blending with the melody in the air. But it wasn't just her. Next to her sat a man, middle-aged, slightly overweight, dressed in a suit that screamed money. His watch alone was probably worth more than my monthly expenses. I clenched my jaw. 3 years. That's how long it had been since I last saw her. 3 years since she tore my heart out and left it to rot. And yet, standing here, I felt the same suffocating pain I did the night I found out. I should have walked away. I should have turned my back and left before she noticed me. But I didn't. Instead, I stood there, gripping the edge of the menu stand, my body rigid as the memories came crashing down. 3 years earlier, the night my world shattered, I had been on my way back from a business trip in Albany. I was supposed to stay overnight, but fate had other plans. An hour into my drive, my client called, apologizing profusely. An accident, a broken fender, nothing serious, but he had to cancel our meeting. Don't worry about it, I told him, forcing a chuckle. We'll reschedule. I hung up and sighed, glancing at the GPS. 2 more hours of driving. Then an idea struck me. Lisa had no idea I was coming home tonight. Maybe I could surprise her. A spontaneous dinner, just the two of us, some wine, some laughter, maybe something more. I smiled to myself. Little did I know, the only surprise that night would be for me. I pulled onto our street an hour and a half later. That's when I saw them. 3 unfamiliar cars parked in my driveway. I frowned. Lisa sometimes had friends over, sure, but 3 cars? That was odd. Still, I told myself not to overthink it. I parked on the curb, grabbed my briefcase, and stepped inside. The moment I did, my stomach dropped. Clothes. Not just a jacket or a pair of shoes. Clothes. Shirts, pants, underwear, all strewn across the living room floor. My heart started to race. Then I heard it. A sound so gut-wrenching it made my blood turn to ice. Lisa's voice. Breathless. Desperate. Pleading. But not for help. For more. I stood there, frozen, my mind screaming at me to wake up, to not believe what I was hearing. But deep down I knew. I forced myself to move, forced my legs to carry me up the stairs, even though every cell in my body begged me to turn back. As I reached the top, I heard a scream, primal, unrestrained. Then I saw them. 3 men, 2 strangers, and the third, her boss, Eric. They didn't see me. They were too wrapped up in their disgusting display, too focused on using my wife to notice the man standing in the doorway, watching his world fall apart. Eric chuckled, running a hand down Lisa's back. You really know how to take care of clients, don't you? Lisa moaned in response. I had heard enough. I backed away, my pulse hammering in my ears, my hands shaking so violently I could barely breathe. I needed proof. If I confronted them now, Lisa would lie. She would spin some ridiculous story, blame it on me, try to salvage what little dignity she had left. No, I wouldn't let that happen. I turned, moving like a ghost down the stairs, straight to my office. I yanked open the desk drawer, my fingers fumbling as I grabbed my digital camera. I didn't care about catching everything. I just needed enough. Back upstairs, I positioned the camera just outside the bedroom door. Click. The lens focused. Lisa's face. The men surrounding her. Click. A few more shots. A short video clip. That was all I could stomach. I stepped back, inhaling sharply. What now? I could storm in there, drag them all out by the throat. But what good would that do? No, I needed something better. A plan. A way to make them pay. And as I stood there, Gripping the camera like a weapon, the first pieces of my revenge began to fall into place. Present day, restaurant. The memory faded, but the rage lingered. I let out a slow breath, unclenching my fists. Lisa still hadn't noticed me. She was too busy smiling at her new boyfriend, the rich fool who had no idea what kind of woman he was sitting next to. I wondered, did he know? Did he know what she was capable of? Did he know about the nights she spent with strangers? The lies, the betrayal? No, of course he didn't. But maybe it was time someone warned him. I straightened my tie, adjusted my cuffs, and walked toward their table. Lisa glanced up, and the moment her eyes met mine, her smile vanished. Shock, then fear. And just like that, I knew. She remembered. She remembered everything. Lisa's face went pale the second she saw me. I could see the thoughts racing through her mind, the way her eyes darted toward her new man. Does he know? Did James come here to expose me? Good. Let her sweat. I leaned in slightly, just enough for her to hear me over the clatter of dishes and murmured conversations. You look good, Lisa, I said smoothly. Almost forgot how stunning you could be. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She was frozen, just like I had been that night when I walked into our home and found her for what she really was. 3 years earlier. My grip tightened around the camera, my breath coming in short, ragged bursts. I had just filmed enough to prove what Lisa was doing, who she was doing, but my hands still shook. My mind screamed at me to do something, anything. I had thought my wife was in trouble. I had thought she was calling out for me. But now, I couldn't unhear it. The way she begged for more. The way her boss, praised her for taking care of his clients. Disgusting. I turned and slipped back downstairs, my legs moving on autopilot. My mind was running 1,000 miles a minute, trying to process the pure insanity of what I had just witnessed. But then, something shifted. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was angry. Fury rolled through my veins like fire, burning away the last shred of love I had for her. I stepped into my office, shoving the camera onto my desk, and opened the gun safe. My fingers hovered over the cold steel of my pistol before I exhaled sharply and stepped back. I wasn't going to kill anyone, but I sure as hell wasn't going to let them walk out of my house like nothing happened. I needed to trap them. A slow, wicked smile spread across my face as an idea formed. First, I grabbed the keys and wallets from the discarded pants in the living room. Without their belongings, they weren't going anywhere fast. Then, I moved outside, crouching near the unfamiliar cars. One by one, I stabbed my pocket knife into the tires, deflating them silently. Even Lisa's car wasn't spared. Now, all I had to do was lure them out. I slipped back inside, picking up my phone. It rang twice before Lisa answered, her voice breathless. Hey baby, how's Albany? She was acting, playing the role of the faithful wife, while 3 naked men stood just feet away from her. Sickening. I forced my voice to stay even. Client canceled. I'll be home soon. You want to do dinner? There was a pause. I could hear her trying to compose herself. Oh, yeah? That sounds great, babe. Just need to freshen up first. She was lying, right to my face. I could hear the rushed whispers in the background, the panicked shuffle of footsteps. Good. She thought she had time. She had no idea what was about to happen. Minutes later, I stood in the shadows near the staircase, camera in hand. Right on cue, for half-dressed bodies scrambled down the stairs, whispering frantically. They were in such a rush to leave that they didn't even notice me standing just a few feet away. Lisa was the last to come down, slipping on her heels, throwing on a jacket, glancing outside to see if the coast was clear. If she had been paying any attention, she might have noticed my car parked on the curb, but she was too focused on getting them out before I arrived. I watched as she opened the front door, stepping onto the porch. The men started talking over one another, barking orders at her. And then, slam. I swung the door shut behind her and turned the lock. The moment she realized what happened, she spun around, her eyes wide with panic. James, she gasped, pressing her hands against the glass. I stared at her, unblinking. The men outside started yelling, pounding on the door. One of them tried to turn the handle, but it wouldn't budge. What the hell, man? Let us in. I ignored them. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and dialed. 911. What's your emergency? There's a break-in at my house, I said, loud enough for Lisa and her friends to hear. 4 men just tried to force their way inside. Lisa's face drained of color. She knew. She knew exactly what I was doing. 10 minutes later, The police cruiser pulled up, red and blue lights flashing. Lisa was still on the porch, shaking, arms wrapped around herself as the three men stood beside her, stiff and awkward. The officer stepped out. One of them, a tall man with a gruff voice, approached me first. "You called about a break-in?" "Yes," I said, pointing toward Lisa and her guests. "These men were inside my house when I got home. I don't know them. My wife never mentioned them, so I assumed they were intruders." Lisa's head snapped up. "James, no." "Ma'am, is this true?" the officer asked, turning to her. She swallowed hard, eyes darting between me and the cops. And then, in a barely audible whisper, she said, "I invited them." Just like that, her knights in shining armor turned on her. "You told us your husband was out of town," one of them hissed. The officer sighed, rubbing his temples. "Since she let them in willingly, there's no crime here. But I'd recommend some serious counseling." He shot Lisa a look of pure disappointment before turning back to me. "You want her back inside tonight?" I stared at Lisa, my pulse steady, my voice ice cold. "No." The officers nodded. "All right then. Ma'am, you'll need to leave with them." Lisa opened her mouth, maybe to beg, maybe to plead, but I was already walking back inside, shutting the door behind me. I locked it, turned off the porch light, and for the first time since I had walked through that front door, I let out a slow breath. She was gone. But this was just the beginning. The house was silent now. The echoes of Lisa's pleading, the officers' voices, and the shouts of her lovers had all faded into the cold night. I stood in the dimly lit hallway, staring at the front door, my fingers still curled into fists. My breathing was steady, but inside, I felt like a storm was raging. She was gone. For now. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I turned on my heel and walked upstairs. The bedroom door was still ajar, the stench of sweat, cheap cologne, and sex hanging in the air like a toxic cloud. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself inside. This was my house, and I was about to reclaim it. I yanked the covers off the bed. They reeked of them. I grabbed the pillows, flung them to the floor, and kicked the mattress over in a violent burst of rage. Then, I noticed it. Lisa's phone, lying on the floor, partially hidden beneath the nightstand. A slow, cold smirk crept across my face as I bent down and picked it up. The screen was still unlocked. Idiot. With a flick of my thumb, I scrolled through her messages. "Sarah, how was last night? You must be sore after that lineup winking face." "Lisa, haha, you have no idea. Jeff is an animal." The clients weren't bad either. Dollar, dollar, dollar. I clenched my teeth. Jeff, that smug bastard. Her boss. The one she was with tonight. My eyes darted down to the attached media files. Photos. Videos. I clicked one. Lisa, my wife, on her knees, looking up at Jeff with an expression I hadn't seen in years. My stomach lurched. I swiped away before my rage made me do something I'd regret. I scrolled further. More messages. More men. My hands trembled with a sick mix of fury and disgust as I tapped into her email. And that's when I found it. A message to Sarah from just a week ago. Lisa's email. "Sarah, I have no interest in James anymore. He's loyal, but boring. I think he's starting to get suspicious, though. Love makes him blind, but he's not an idiot. I need to be careful. I still want a house and a car, and if I play this right, I can get alimony too. Jeff and Bill have hinted at promotions and perks. I just need to keep playing along. It's been easy so far. And Tony, oh my God, I need to recover before our next Tuesday party. Last Thursday's video was insane. First time with that many men at once. Can't wait to see the footage. Send it when you can. As for my dream man, he has to be rich, obedient, and easy to control. I don't care about love, just comfort. The sex I can get elsewhere." I read it again and again. The words burned into my brain, each sentence cutting deeper than the last. This was the woman I had loved. The woman I had built a life with. The woman I had trusted. I felt a laugh bubbling in my throat, but it wasn't from amusement. It was hollow, bitter, like the kind of laugh a man gives when he realizes he's been the punchline of a cruel joke for years. I dropped the phone onto the bed and wiped a hand down my face. This wasn't just cheating. This was who she was. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't conflicted. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. She enjoyed this, and she had planned for it. I took a deep breath, shoving the bile rising in my throat back down. I couldn't let emotion take over. Not yet. I needed more. I needed everything. I walked over to her dresser, yanking open drawers, tossing her clothes to the floor in a whirlwind of vengeance. Then, at the bottom, I felt something. A false panel. I pried it up and found a stack of DVDs. At least 7 or 8 of them, all unlabeled. My gut twisted. I already knew what was on them. I took them downstairs, setting them next to my laptop. My hands hovered over the first disc before I finally slid it into the drive. The screen flickered to life. The first video started in a dimly lit room. Lisa's best friend, Sarah, was there too. I recognized the house. Sarah's place. Lisa and Sarah with multiple men. I hit fast forward, skipping through hours of depravity. Different locations, different partners, different clients. Every pause, every frame, was another knife in my ribs. Then, the last 2 videos. The first, Lisa and her tennis coach, Tony. The second, Lisa in the boardroom, at work, with Jeff. And Bill Evans, the CEO of her company. The man who was constantly praised in the local paper for his philanthropy. A well-respected man in the community. A married man. A dead man walking. I shut the laptop, my breathing heavy. This was bigger than I thought. Lisa wasn't just cheating on me. She was profiting from it. Her boss, his clients, her coach, all of them. And I had the proof. I grabbed a large envelope and began packing it with the evidence. Lisa's phone, the DVDs, the camera tape. I wasn't done yet. I turned to her computer, powered it on, and started duplicating everything onto an external drive. It took an hour. An hour of staring at a digital time bomb. An hour of remembering the past 10 years of my life were nothing but a lie. By the time I was finished, the rage had settled into something colder. Control. Lisa thought she had won. She thought she had me wrapped around her finger. She had no idea I was about to ruin her. And everyone who touched her. I grabbed the envelope, my laptop, and my car keys. There was only one person I trusted with this information. Ted, my lawyer, my best friend. The only person who had always told me the truth, even when I didn't want to hear it. I was done being blind. Now, it was time to strike back. The next morning, I woke up on the couch. My back ached, my head pounded, and my throat was dry as sandpaper. I barely remembered falling asleep, but I sure as hell remembered why I was here and not in my bedroom. Lisa's scent still lingered upstairs. The ghost of her betrayal haunted every corner of that room, and I couldn't stand to be near it. But today wasn't about mourning. Today was about revenge. I sat up, running a hand down my face. Sunlight streamed through the window, but it didn't warm me. I felt nothing but cold, calculated rage. Then my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Unknown number. I answered. Mr. Thomas, a deep voice greeted me. This is Bill Evans from Susan's office. If possible, I'd like to discuss the events from last evening at your house. Could we meet today in my office to clarify the situation for all involved? I nearly laughed. Bill Evans, the man who had been screwing my wife in his own boardroom, now wanted to talk? I forced my voice to remain steady. I have an important meeting this morning, but I'll call you back before noon to arrange something for today. That would be great, Bill replied, the relief in his voice almost comical. He had no idea what was coming. I hung up, grabbed the envelope full of evidence, and left for my lawyer's office. Ted Worth had been my lawyer for over 15 years. He had seen me through business deals, property investments, and tax filings. But today, he wasn't just my lawyer. He was my weapon. When I walked into his office, his secretary, Mary, greeted me with a curious look. Bobby, Ted told me to clear his schedule for you, she said. He doesn't do that for just anyone. I smirked. Let's just say today's a little different. She led me inside, and there he was, Ted, sitting behind his desk, flipping through a legal brief. He looked up, adjusting his glasses. Holy hell, Bobby. Mary said you sounded urgent. You in trouble? I dropped the envelope onto his desk. Not me. He raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. Instead, he opened the envelope and started pulling out the contents. The phone, the DVDs, the printed emails. His face darkened with every passing second. Jesus Christ, he muttered, clicking on Lisa's phone and scrolling through her messages. This is a gold mine. I folded my arms. I want them all to burn, Ted. Ted leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. All right, let's prioritize. You want a divorce? Obviously, I scoffed. But I also want to hurt them. Not just Lisa. All of them. Ted smirked. I like the sound of that. He started listing out our options. First, We'd go after Lisa's workplace. Jeff Davis, the scumbag boss, was finished. I had him on camera. But the real prize was Bill Evans. If Bill wanted to keep his little empire, he'd have to pay for it. Second, the tennis club. I had footage of Lisa's coach sleeping with her in the locker room, along with some other men who had joined in. If the club owner refused to handle it quietly, we'd sue the place into the ground. Third, Jeff's business clients. The two men who had been in my house with Lisa, they were his clients. High-profile businessmen. They would do anything to keep this quiet. Ted rubbed his chin. If we play this right, we could be looking at 7 figures. I nodded, my blood humming with adrenaline. Then let's start playing. At 2 p.m., I arrived at Bill Evans' office. I wasn't alone. Ted walked beside me, carrying a briefcase full of hell. Bill's office was nice. Mahogany furniture. A view of the city skyline. Framed pictures of him shaking hands with politicians and CEOs. Too bad he was about to ruin his own reputation. Bill stood as we entered, his smile fake as hell. "Bob, thank you for coming." I ignored him and took a seat. Ted followed, placing his briefcase on the table. Bill cleared his throat. "Look, I understand last night must have been difficult. I'd like to discuss a way forward. Something beneficial for everyone." I leaned forward, my voice dangerously calm. "All right, Bill. Here's how it's going to go." Ted opened the briefcase and pulled out a portable DVD player. He hit play. Bill's smile vanished. On the screen, he and Lisa were very busy in the boardroom. His own office. His own table. His own wife's worst nightmare. His face drained of color. Ted smirked. "This is just one of the many souvenirs Bobby has collected." Bill swallowed hard. You recorded this?" "No, Bill," I said. "Lisa did. And she saved it. Right under my nose." He sank back into his chair, rubbing his temple. "What do you want?" Ted crossed his legs, his tone sharp. "First, Jeff Davis is fired. Effective immediately. Second, Lisa keeps her job. Third, we want a significant financial offer to ensure Bobby never releases these tapes." Bill hesitated. "How much?" Ted smiled. $2.5 million. Bill inhaled sharply, but he didn't argue. He knew we had him by the throat. "You'll have our answer by Friday," he said stiffly. Ted stood. "Make it Wednesday. Or we start mailing copies to your wife, your board members, and, hell, maybe even the local news." Bill's hands trembled. "Wednesday." I stood, adjusting my jacket. "Pleasure doing business, Bill." He said nothing as we walked out. Ted clapped me on the back. "That was fun." I chuckled, the weight on my chest slightly lighter. One down. Plenty more to go. Walking out of Bill Evans' office, I felt something I hadn't in years: control. For so long, I had been blind, a fool stumbling through a marriage built on deceit. But not anymore. I was calling the shots now. Ted and I stepped onto the sidewalk, the midday sun warm against my skin. He grinned, adjusting his tie. "You know, Bobby, I almost feel bad for that bastard." I smirked. "Don't." Bill Evans was the first to fall, but he wouldn't be the last. Lisa had built an entire network of betrayal, and I was going to burn it to the ground. Back at Ted's office, we started preparing for the next phase. Lisa's boss, Jeff Davis, was already a dead man walking. If Bill had any brains, he'd cut him loose before Wednesday. Next, we had to deal with her tennis coach, Tony, and the Ace Tennis Club. I pulled out one of the DVDs I had recovered from Lisa's drawer and handed it to Ted. "This is the one from the club." He raised an eyebrow. "I assume it's not a motivational sports video." I shook my head. Lisa and Tony. In the men's locker room. With a crowd. Ted sighed, rubbing his temples. "Jesus. The club owner's gonna have a heart attack when he sees this." "Good," I muttered. Ted leaned back in his chair. "All right. The approach is the same as Bill Evans. We give him a choice. He either handles it quietly, or we destroy him publicly." He picked up his phone and started making calls. A few hours later, we walked into the Ace Tennis Club. It was a high-end place, the kind that catered to the city's elite. Lawyers, doctors, businessmen, men who paid good money for their memberships and expected discretion in return. The owner, Harry Riel, was waiting for us in his office. He was in his mid-50s, silver-haired, with the look of a man who'd rather be anywhere else. He gestured to the chairs in front of his desk. "Gentlemen, what can I do for you?" Ted didn't waste time. He pulled out the portable DVD player and pressed play. Harry's face dropped. On the screen, Lisa and Tony were going at it, completely unaware that half a dozen men were watching. By the time the last guy stepped into frame, Harry's hands were shaking. He reached for the power button, but Ted stopped him. "I think you'll want to watch the rest." Harry forced himself to keep watching, his jaw tightening with every second. When the video ended, he exhaled sharply. "Where the hell did you get this?" I leaned forward. "Lisa kept it. Probably as a souvenir." Harry rubbed his temples. "Jesus Christ. If this gets out, my club's reputation is finished." Ted smirked. "That depends entirely on you, Harry." The old man's eyes narrowed. "What do you want?" I sat back, arms crossed. "First, Tony is fired. Not suspended. Not transferred. Gone." Harry nodded stiffly. "Done." "Second," Ted continued, "we want a financial settlement for Bobby." Harry scoffed. "You're extorting me?" Ted shrugged. "You can call it whatever you want, but if you don't pay, this video goes public. And when your high-profile members find out their wives might be doing the same thing Lisa did, let's just say you'll have a mass exodus on your hands." Harry's hands curled into fists. I could see the calculations running through his head. Finally, he sighed. "Fine. I'll have an offer for you by tomorrow. But I want every copy of that video destroyed." Ted smiled. "That depends on the offer." We stood, and I reached for the DVD player. Before leaving, I turned back. "Oh, and Harry." His bloodshot eyes met mine. "Say hi to Tony for me," I said with a smirk. We left the tennis club, and for the first time in months, I felt lighter. I glanced at Ted. "That went well." He chuckled. "Harry's an arrogant prick, but he knows when he's beaten." I nodded, staring out at the busy street. Lisa had no idea what was happening behind the scenes. By tomorrow, Jeff Davis would be fired. By the end of the week, the tennis club would pay for their part. And next, the real money would start rolling in. The next morning, I woke up to a voicemail from Bill Evans. "Bob, we're prepared to settle. Jeff Davis is being terminated, effective immediately. I need to know your final number." I smirked. Ted and I had agreed on a number the night before, $2.5 million. I called Bill back. $3 million. He hesitated. "That's not what we agreed on." "That was yesterday," I said smoothly. "Today it's 3, or the video goes viral." Silence. Then, "Fine. You'll have the paperwork by Friday." I hung up and turned to Ted, who was sipping his coffee. "You're an asshole," he said with a grin. I grinned back. "Damn right I am." By the end of the week, I had $3 million sitting in my account. Jeff Davis was jobless. Harry Riel paid up and fired Tony. And Lisa? She still had no idea what was coming next. I wasn't done. Not even close. By the end of the week, I was $3 million richer. Jeff Davis was fired. The tennis club paid up. And Lisa? She still had no idea her world was unraveling, piece by piece. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Saturday morning, I was sitting in Ted's office, sipping a cup of coffee, when he leaned forward with a grin. "You ready for the next move?" I smirked. I was born ready. Ted chuckled, pulling out a folder. "That brings us to the 2 clients who were in your house that night. They're big names in the industry. If this story breaks, their companies will take a serious hit. They'll pay to keep their reputations intact." I nodded. "How much?" Ted rubbed his chin. $1 million each should be a fair starting point." I let out a low whistle. "So that's another 2 mil? Minimum," Ted confirmed. "They might even offer more if they panic enough." I leaned back in my chair. "Let's make them panic." Ted grinned. "That's the spirit." Later that afternoon, we made the calls. The first client, Mark Peterson, answered after the second ring. "Bobby," he said cautiously, "I was hoping I wouldn't hear from you." I smiled coldly. "Then maybe you shouldn't have been in my house, screwing my wife." Silence. Then, "What do you want?" Ted took over. "Simple, Mr. Peterson. $1 million. In exchange, Bobby forgets what he saw. No lawsuits, no public scandal, no videos appearing on certain websites." Mark inhaled sharply. "There's footage?" Ted tapped the DVD case on the table. "Crystal clear. And I'd hate for it to end up in the wrong hands." Another pause. "Fine," Mark said through gritted teeth. "I'll have the money wired by Monday." Ted smirked. "Pleasure doing business." One down. The second client, Richard Hale, was harder to reach. But when he finally picked up, his voice was shaking. "Listen, Bobby, I didn't know she was married," he blurted out. "I swear to God." I cut him off. "That's funny, Rich, because you sure acted like you knew when you ran out of my house half naked." Silence. Ted sighed dramatically. "Look, Mr. Hale, we're not unreasonable men. $1 million, and this all goes away." Hale cursed under his breath. I need time. You have 48 hours, I said coldly. Or we go public. Another long silence. Then, I'll get the money. Ted grinned, giving me a nod. 2 down. By Monday evening, $2 million hit my account. I checked my bank balance, feeling a satisfaction that had nothing to do with the money itself. This wasn't about getting rich. This was about making them pay. And I wasn't done yet. Tuesday morning, I got a text from Mary, Ted's secretary. Mary, Lisa just called. Wants a meeting with Ted. Should I stall? I smirked. She finally realized something was wrong. Me, no. Let's hear what she has to say. An hour later, I sat in Ted's office, arms crossed, watching as Lisa walked in. She looked different. The usual confidence in her stride was gone. There were bags under her eyes, and she seemed nervous. James, she said softly, looking at me. I didn't respond. Ted motioned for her to sit. So, Lisa, what can I do for you? She swallowed. I know something's going on. My boss got fired. People are whispering at work. And my bank account is frozen. I raised an eyebrow. That must be stressful. Her eyes snapped to mine, searching for any hint of emotion. She found none. James, please, she whispered. Did you do this? I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. Tell me, Lisa, when exactly did you stop giving a damn about our marriage? Was it before or after you started screwing your boss? Her face crumbled. I don't know what to say. I chuckled, shaking my head. For once in your life, Lisa, that's the truth. Ted cleared his throat. Lisa, let's cut to the chase. Your financial accounts have been frozen because of pending litigation. Your company is preparing to fire you. And your reputation? Well, let's just say it's circling the drain. Tears welled up in her eyes. Ted, I need help. Ted tilted his head. The only help I can offer is advice. Get a lawyer. Lisa blinked, stunned. You won't represent me. Ted scoffed. Lisa, you betrayed my best friend. You humiliated him. I'm only here to make sure you don't drag this out longer than necessary. Lisa turned back to me. James, I never meant to hurt you. I exhaled slowly. You didn't just hurt me, Lisa. You burned everything to the ground. And now, you're standing in the ashes, wondering why you're covered in soot. Tears slipped down her cheeks. What happens now? I stood, grabbing my coat. Now? I finish what I started. And with that, I walked out, leaving her in the ruins of her own making. I stepped out of Ted's office, the cold air hitting me like a slap. Lisa was still inside, probably crying, trying to figure out how her perfect little world had collapsed around her. She thought she was untouchable. She thought she could play me for a fool, use me for my money, my stability, while she ran wild behind my back. She was wrong. Now, she had nothing. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. By the time I got home, the house felt different. Lighter. Cleaner. Because it was finally mine again. No trace of Lisa's perfume. No lying lips whispering empty, I love yous. No more fake smiles masking betrayal. I grabbed a beer from the fridge, sat down at the kitchen table, and checked my phone. There was one more loose end to tie up. Bill Evans had paid up. The tennis club had settled. The 2 businessmen had wired their hush money. But Lisa? She still needed a final lesson. I opened my laptop, scrolling through the files I had copied from her phone and computer. Emails, photos, videos. All the evidence of her secret life. Then I found it. A list. A detailed spreadsheet she had created, tracking her clients. Names. Dates. Amounts paid. My stomach turned. Lisa had literally been keeping a record of her conquests, like she was running a business. Some names I recognized. Jeff Davis, Bill Evans, Tony the tennis coach. But some were powerful men. Men with everything to lose. I leaned back, fingers tapping against the table. I had 2 options. 1, I could burn Lisa's life completely. Leak everything. Send the files to every wife, employer, and newspaper in the city. Turn her into a social pariah. Or 2, I could let her live with what she did, knowing that at any moment, I held the power to destroy her completely. I smirked. Option 2 sounded a lot more fun. The next morning, I made my final move. Lisa was living at her friend Sarah's house, the same friend who had encouraged her lifestyle. Fitting. I pulled up outside, taking my time, sipping my coffee. Then I sent her a text. Me, step outside. Now. Less than a minute later, the front door opened. Lisa hesitated when she saw my car, then slowly walked toward me, arms wrapped around herself. She looked like hell. Her makeup was smudged, her eyes red from crying. She wasn't the confident, arrogant woman she had been when this all started. Good. I rolled down the window. Get in. She hesitated. James, get in. Something in my tone must have told her not to argue, because she opened the door and slipped inside. I didn't speak right away. I let the silence hang between us, thick and heavy. She shifted uncomfortably. What do you want? I glanced at her, my voice calm. I found your list. Her breath hitched. You kept records, Lisa. Names. Amounts. Everything. I shook my head. You were never just cheating, were you? You were profiting off it. Tears welled up in her eyes. James, please. I cut her off. I should send this list to every single wife, every single boss, every single person connected to these men. I should ruin you the way you tried to ruin me. She sobbed. Please, I'm sorry. I was stupid. I turned to her, my expression unreadable. I'm not going to do it. She froze. What? I smirked. No, Lisa. You're going to do it to yourself. I reached into my pocket, pulling out a folded piece of paper. Here's what's going to happen, I said, placing it in her lap. This is our divorce settlement. You will sign it. You will take the house and the car, just like you always wanted. And in return, I leaned in, voice dropping to a whisper. You vanish from my life. Forever. Lisa trembled, her hands gripping the paper. And if I don't? I pulled out my phone, flipping the screen toward her. A draft email sat open. Subject, to whom it may concern. Attached, her list. Her face drained of color. You wouldn't, she choked out. I smiled. Try me. She collapsed into tears, her whole body shaking. But I didn't feel pity. I felt justice. Slowly, she nodded. I'll sign it. Good girl. I put the car in drive, pulling away from the curb. Where are we going? She asked weakly. I didn't answer. 5 minutes later, I pulled up in front of the courthouse. I turned to her. We're making it official. Today. She stared at me, eyes wide, but she didn't argue. She knew she had lost. An hour later, it was done. Lisa signed the papers. The judge stamped the approval. And just like that, I was free. I walked out of the courthouse, the sun bright overhead. The weight that had been crushing me for years was gone. Lisa lingered behind me, looking lost. I turned back one last time. Goodbye, Lisa. She flinched, like the words physically hurt her. I gave her a final smirk. Enjoy the house, strumpet. And then I walked away, leaving her standing in the ruins of everything she destroyed. I didn't need revenge anymore. I had something better. Closure. 3 years. That's how long it had been since I walked out of that courthouse, leaving Lisa with nothing but the house she betrayed me in and the shattered remnants of her reputation. 3 years since I burned everything she built and left her drowning in the ashes. I had moved on, or at least I thought I had. But then, on an otherwise uneventful night, I walked into a restaurant and saw her. Lisa, sitting at a table, laughing at something her new man said. He was older, dressed in an expensive suit, his wrist adorned with a Rolex that probably cost more than some people's yearly salary. I stopped in my tracks, gripping the menu stand so hard my knuckles turned white. For a moment, the past flooded back. The betrayal, the lies, the humiliation. The night I found her with those men, the cold satisfaction of taking everything from her. I should have turned around and walked out. But I didn't. Instead, I stepped forward, making my way to her table, my footsteps steady, deliberate. Lisa must have sensed something because the second she looked up, her laughter died. Her face paled, her lips parting slightly in shock. The man beside her frowned, glancing between us. Lisa? Something wrong. She blinked rapidly, recovering, forcing a smile. No, it's just an old friend. I smirked. That's one way to put it. The man raised an eyebrow. You must be Bob Thomas, Lisa's ex-husband. I tilted my head slightly. And you must be her latest investment. Lisa stiffened. The man's expression darkened. I'm her fiancé. I let out a slow chuckle, shaking my head. Well, congratulations. I hope you enjoy sharing. Lisa's eyes flashed with something. Anger? Fear? Guilt? Maybe all three. I wasn't here to fight. I was here for closure. I pulled out my wallet, retrieving a worn, folded piece of paper. I dropped it on the table in front of the man. You should read that. He hesitated before unfolding it. His eyes scanned the page, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. Lisa lunged for it, but he pulled it out of her reach. What the hell is this, Lisa? She swallowed hard. It's nothing. Just an old email. I crossed my arms. It's an email Lisa sent to her best friend before I found out about her little side business. It explains exactly how she planned to screw me over for money. How she wanted a rich, obedient husband to finance her lifestyle while she got her real fun elsewhere. The man's grip on the paper tightened. He turned to Lisa. Is this true? Her voice trembled. Baby, please, I was different back then. I was confused. Check under the bottom drawer of your dresser, I said, cutting her off. Both of them turned to me. What? The man asked. I smirked. That's where she hides her real secrets. Go home. Take a look. Then decide if you still want to marry her. He stared at Lisa, his jaw clenched. Is there something I should know, Lisa? Lisa's hands trembled. No. He's just trying to. Check, I repeated. The man suddenly stood, grabbing his coat. He stormed out without another word. Lisa's eyes followed him in panic. Peter, wait. She scrambled out of her chair, nearly knocking over the wine glass in front of her. For a second, she looked back at me, her eyes filled with something close to desperation. Then she ran after him, disappearing into the night. I stood there for a moment, exhaling slowly. That was the last time I ever saw Lisa. I paid for my drink, left the restaurant, and walked into the cool night air. A part of me wondered what Peter would find under that dresser. Would he see the hidden stash of DVDs? The receipts from the gifts other men had given her? The messages she had thought were deleted? It didn't matter. Lisa was Lisa. Some people never change. I wasn't bitter. Not anymore. I had won. Not just financially. Not just legally. I had won my freedom. And that was worth more than any revenge. As I walked away, I felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. Lisa was finally out of my life for good. And for the first time since that night 3 years ago, I didn't feel anything at all. As I walked away from that restaurant, I couldn't help but reflect on everything I had been through. The pain, the betrayal, the anger, it had nearly consumed me. But in the end, I came out stronger, smarter, and free. Looking back, I see the lessons clear as day. First, never ignore your instincts. Love can blind us, but gut feelings rarely lie. If something feels off, pay attention. Second, protect yourself, emotionally, financially, and legally. Love is built on trust, but trust should never replace wisdom. Keep records, have safeguards, and never put yourself in a position where someone can take everything from you. Third, forgiveness is optional, but letting go is necessary. I never needed Lisa's apology. I never needed closure from her. I gave it to myself. And finally, happiness isn't about getting revenge, it's about moving forward. I could have spent years being bitter, but that would have meant she still had control over me. Instead, I took my life back. For anyone reading this, especially those who have been betrayed, remember, the best revenge is not destroying them. It's rebuilding yourself into someone they can never touch again.